Let's call this meeting open at 8:17. Is everybody happy with me saying that? Or 8:15 p.m.? 8:16, actually, Mr. Mayor. Well, if everybody's happy with 8:16, let's go on with 8:16. I move that the agenda be adopted as presented, Mr. Mayor. Seconded by Councillor Simard. Any additions? Well, I'm going to ask that item 9.1 be withdrawn. Yes, that's already done. All right, then. The Grey Island resolution, where does this go? That fits into correspondence, item 5.2, Mr. Mayor. Well, add this on to 5.2. So this falls under the heading of correspondence with regards to the OMBF Partnership Fund matter. Now, the provincial government cut us funds with regard to that, and Grey Island has... the city of Grey Island has come up with a resolution to contest this. I'd like to come up with a resolution which is technical in nature. We've just adopted a new policy with regard to acquisitions. Well, supply and services philosophy that we've adopted under item 9.2. Should we not change the makeup of the resolution and to reflect what comes out, what is removed from the policy? There's only one section that is removed. Are we going to modify it immediately, or are we just going to plow ahead without any formal modifications being brought to this? Yeah, we can go ahead without any formal modifications. Fine. Is everyone in favor? Carried then. That's fine. Declarations of pecuniary interests? None. That's fine. Delegations and presentations? Mr. Wilson. Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
It's been a little while since we last had a fire station report to you. In discussion with the CAO, the decision was instead of me writing 19,000 words into paper, if a picture's worth 1,000 words, then I have 19 pictures to show you tonight to walk you through sort of station development as to where we are today. So some of you may have been by one or both of the stations. The idea is just to bring council's awareness up to where we are. And the pictures, the last pictures that are in there were taken earlier today, so you should have an idea as to where we're at. So we're going to start off with Bourget. As council will recall, this was the building or the conceptual drawing that was put together as we started this construction process. We started off by working through some plans and coming up with a floor plan. Appreciate that that's not the easiest to look at, but that was the idea, that we came up with some drawings. We started off with a flat piece of field just along Laval Road across from the Caisse Populaire, and then we started excavation. So in October of last year we started excavation and pouring the footings for the new stations. That progressed with some night construction to try and make up some lost time with getting our foundations poured. And then we saw the steel arrive in December and started to see steel billing go up, and that was sort of the first signs of life to our new station in Bourget. Into January, over the winter months, the steel erection continued and getting the building up. In February, they started heating the inside, so this is insulated tarp over top of heating coils to try and get the frost out of the ground so that they could pour the concrete slab inside. So that was as of February, and then as of today you can see the building is largely enclosed. They've taken the staff that were putting up the steel building are now working in Rockland, so that's why you're seeing a lot of progress in Rockland that we're going to talk about in a minute. So as soon as they get the bulk of the work done in Rockland, they'll go back and put on the other color accents, the horizontal panels and stuff that are now in stock ready to go up in Bourget. And this picture was taken inside the station today, so the concrete slabs are poured on the two sides, so the office sort of classroom side for the fire piece, as well as the EMS side. And you can see steel studs are starting to go up in here and starting to form the interior walls of that station. So progress is coming along quite nice. One of the EMS doors is already, the overhead doors is already on for EMS as of this morning. The other one should be going on tomorrow. In terms of the next few weeks, you'll see down towards the bottom, this is where you're starting to see plumbing and drywall stuff get installed. So over the next few weeks, they're working on interior finishings. Hopefully we'll be pouring the last of the concrete slab for the fire apparatus bays just after Easter, so just after the Easter weekend that'll get poured, and then it's all interior work and getting electrical and drywall and everything else done. So things are progressing fairly well in Bourget. We're pretty close to on schedule there in terms of an expected completion date. Questions on Bourget? In Rockland, we've got two-phase construction going on. So the phase line is roughly here. And so right now we're seeing this portion of the building that's going up in Rockland on Laurier. Again, we went through design phase to come up with some floor plans for what that's going to look like. This is the existing station at the back that is still operational right now. Again, we started off with the land that was where the White House was in the Pilon property. And that started off with excavation into the soil and trying to make sure we got our footings poured. This is starting to put in the services back in October of last year. So core services were going in, again with some night work to try and get caught up. There was some leftover debris and garbage removal, which council may recall you guys approved some additional expense to get rid of some of that. So that was happening in November. In December, we started seeing the footings get poured along with the foundation walls starting to go up. Shortly behind Bourget, but now we've got steel arriving in February and the steel structure starting to go up in February in Rockland. And this is where we're at as of this morning. So the steel structure is progressing nicely. They're starting to complete the one side. This is the joint between phase 1 and phase 2. In Bourget, we're hoping to have occupancy in July. In Rockland, we're expecting to be able to move into this portion or phase 1 of the building in August, at which point they'll then start phase 2 and renovation of the existing building. Over the next few weeks in Rockland, again, you'll see the finish closing of phase 1. You're going to see some ground thawing starting to happen on both the EMS and fire sides so that they can start pouring the slab on grade, which is what you're seeing down towards the bottom of this. So we are a little bit behind in Rockland. We're expecting to get possession of that building in January of 2020, which is a little bit behind schedule, largely due to some delays with steel, getting steel in from Steelway. There are some weather delays, but most of it was related to steel.
Questions?
What was the original completion date?
That's a good question. Off the top of my head, I believe that our original completion date in Rockland was November, tail end of November, if I remember correctly, and that's been delayed a couple times now. And we're now looking late January in terms of when we would get occupancy there. Bourget's pretty close. It's within a couple weeks of whatever that original date was going to be.
Autre question? Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Love it.
Mr. Mayor, thank you.
All right then. Petitions and correspondence. I believe we received a letter that we gave our approval on beforehand concerning radioactive material in the Petawawa area. So do you want us to comment, Mr. Mayor? No. I believe that Quebec is active in this matter at present. I believe we need to support them because I believe that this radioactive prone site will be built close to a river and where there are some earthquakes that did occur in the past, and products from different areas will be brought there, not just from Petawawa itself, and brought there close to water courses that are used, or waterways that are used by the general population there. I would like this to be seconded, if it's possible. Well, I'll come up with a resolution that is to be prepared during the course of a regular meeting, Mr. Mayor. Fine. Notice of motion. I believe 5.2, we had the gray lands. Did everybody... I can read the... Whereas the provincial government announced that it was conducting a review of the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund, OMPF, which provides annual funding allotments to municipal governments to offset capital costs, and whereas municipalities were further advised that the overall spending envelope for the program would decrease, having a significant impact on future budgets. And how funds are raised by municipalities, funding will be reduced by an unspecified amount. And whereas if allocations to municipalities are reduced, council will need to compensate with property tax increases or local service reductions. And whereas the 2018 Grey Island allocation was $1,068,000, which is the equivalent of 10% or to 10% of the township's municipal tax revenue, and whereas the municipality of Grey Highlands prides itself on efficient and value for money practices every day, now therefore be it resolved that although an interim payment has been received, Council of the Municipalities of Grey Highlands expresses grave concern with the potential reduction and or loss of the OMPF allotment in future years, and further, Council petitions the provincial government to complete the OMPF review in an expeditious manner, as future financial considerations ensure that municipalities sustain their sense of sensibility, and that this be circulated to the Premier, our local MPP, the Minister of Housing, and all other municipalities for their endorsement and support. I would like support. Everybody's in favor? Fine. So we'll adopt a resolution to this effect at the next meeting then. Fine. Item 6.1, a call for members' resolution presented by Mayor Guy Desjardins and seconded by Councillor André J. Lalonde in regards to a request to cancel interest fees submitted by the Clarence Beavers Junior Hockey Club. Mr. Lalonde, whereas a request was submitted by Mr. Jerry Dubé on behalf of the Clarence Beavers Junior Hockey Club to cancel interest fees applied to an outstanding invoice. And whereas this hockey club annually pays approximately $25,000 in ice rental fees to the City of Clarence and Rockland, be it resolved that Council hereby authorizes the administration to cancel all interest fees that may appear on the Clarence Beavers Junior Hockey Club invoice as of May the 6th, 2018. Fine. So it was, go ahead. Listen. When we're dealing with precedents, those precedents that we've alluded to in the past, there are many hockey teams within the municipality. Well, we're not reducing the amount. We're just impacting the interest. Well, have we made research to the effect that other hockey teams would owe interest to the municipality, or is it only the Beavers that are involved? Sir? Well, let me direct this to the Director of Recreational Culture. I don't believe so. And our Director of Operations? Well, Mr. Mayor, it's of course we'll be creating a precedent. You know, I'm in favor, Mr. Mayor, of helping out the businesses, well, not the businesses, but the minor hockey league folks. But at a certain point in time, Mr. Mayor, I believe, I'm sorry, we have to take a stand, and I'm against this. They'll all come and knock at our door. They'll all come knocking at our door. Mrs. Chouanière, maybe other clubs made the necessary efforts and made sure that they were making the payments, and they were making the required payments, and now if we favor someone who has not made payments. This is something that was asked by the owner of the club, and this has been funneled through me. I'm just telling you what I'm thinking on this, Mr. Mayor. This is a great cause, but we cannot allow us to take up such initiative. It's not fair for others. I know this is just a notice of motion, and at a certain point in time, somebody will say, well, you know, we won't pass it. But if I'm not mistaken, the Beavers Club received an amount of money when a certain junior hockey club left the league. Well, we're not talking about the minor hockey league manner, but a junior C hockey league. But we owed them money. No, Mr. Levert. Were there any reasons why they didn't make any payments or any interests or interest payments? Is there a reason why they're running a deficit position? Well, the letter was addressed to you. This is an owner who is in difficulty at present, but he's running a business, I believe. Am I not mistaken in saying this? Well, it's not really a business. It's more of a, those type of Junior B, Junior C hockey leagues are not run the same way as Junior A hockey league teams. The caliber is quite different, and caliber of play is much different, and it has more of a community bent to it, a community spirit bent to it. I don't think that the guy can say that he makes money with this club. The same rule would apply to any other junior hockey club in the area. It's difficult, and he also lived through the move from Rockland to Clarence. He had to buy new jerseys and had to change a few operational items here, there, and everywhere, and he incurred additional costs. I'm saying, let's give him a chance this year, but that's it. Councillor Simard, is this the first time that he has failed to pay interest, or is that not the first time that he has failed to pay interest? Let me see here. Let me look into this. I believe that this Junior B hockey club has been in existence. Last year, it has been conducting its operations last year and this year. Well, Mr. Desnoyers, those owners that have difficulty in paying interests are accommodated, are they not? I'll allow them, let's say, to embark upon a payment schedule spread out through a longer period of time. Might be a philosophy that's applicable to this gentleman in this particular instance. Some other owners might run into similar type difficulties. We might look into this as a possible solution. Mr. Mayor, we're asked to void $4,000 some odd of interest, and this agreement was arrived at with the league. Given this agreement, he wound up with accumulated interest. There's a means of coming up to an understanding with him paying the arrears of interests, or the interest arrears. But an agreement has been already ratified with regards to back payments owed. All those in favor of the resolution? Well, we're just going to table it for not. We're not going to take a decision whether it's going to be debated at the regular meeting or not. No. So, Mr. Mayor, it all depends. If all councillors are not in favor, well, just withdraw the members' resolution and spare us further deliberations on this. Well, it's not as if we're dealing with someone who's been doing this on a regular basis. This individual encountered difficulty only this year. Look, he's running a business, and if ever he reaped benefits from this business, it would not be plowed back to the municipality or funneled back to the municipality, and I'm in agreement with the contingencies that we discussed tonight. Is the owner taking arrangements with the Canada Revenue Agency right now? If he hasn't not paid interest or has not taken care of business, well, I'm just going to ask who's in favor. And if you're not in favor, we'll just withdraw it from the... All those in favor of granting him the... of removing this imposition that he has of paying back interests. Nobody's in favor? Well, we're withdrawing this. Let's go on to the next written resolution, members' resolution. Oops, did I hear something coming out? What is this? What is this noise? I recommend. Let's start off again. Whereas council has been approached by property owners within the urban area who want to have chicken coops in their backyards. Be it resolved that the administration be hereby mandated to prepare a report to outline the process that needs to be initiated to allow the installation of chicken coops in urban residential zones, within the boundaries of Clarence and Rockland. Was this noise originating from Mr. Bouchard's desk? Or Mr. Grimard had his hand raised, by the way. I'd like to know how many owners approach the municipality to obtain this type of right? Owners? I believe 2 owners approached. I see. You received one email and I received one. I see. I did receive an email to this effect. Also, I have another resident, a female resident close to where I live, that made a similar type request. Now, I think that what I'd be curious to note is that Gatineau also faced the same dilemma, if you wish, or the same situation. If there was one rooster with 2 hens, what happens noise-wise? I think it would be wise to take a look at the Gatineau bylaw. And how do we apply this? If somebody has 4 hens or 6 hens, well, it's going to fall on Mr. Wilson's laps. Mr. Wilson, are you going to get cracking on this case, depending on the number of hens? Councillor Zant, please. I'd just like to say that many folks will be sending emails left and right with regard to this. I'm not in favor of this resolution. I brought it to the council's attention because somebody asked me to do so. I do not believe that in an urban sector one should be allowed to keep hens. I'd like to see a report, though, dealing with what other municipalities do concerning this particular type of situation. Mr. Levert, after having spoken to some individuals, and people have told me that some people already keep chickens in the urban area of Clarence-Rockland. Can you send Mr. Wilson off to verify all homes that are suspected of housing hens? Well, once again, Mr. Mayor, it's just a matter of taking a look at what the true interest of people is. What I know that a woman living at home found it quite constructive to keep a hen house, to manage a hen house for educational purposes, because she runs a daycare center. How about skunks and raccoons in somebody's backyard? And I'm thinking of the manpower required to manage this. We'll be coming up with, we'll be contending with 4 full-time bylaw enforcement officers now. I believe it would be a worthwhile initiative, but I don't think we're ready. We don't have the resources, and we're not going to adopt a bylaw that we will not be able to follow up on. As Mr. Lalonde has stated, we don't have the manpower to do so, and we're not ready to get involved in this. We can perform research with regards to requirements, property size, because hens are going to exude odors during the summer. Well, of course, in the Morris Village area, 2 hens already exude odors or discharge odors, notwithstanding. I believe there's still an opportunity in all of this as to what an individual's intent is. If there's a very severe fine imposed either for a first or a second offense, I believe then that people will think twice before they'll keep more than 2 hens. Let me take a look at the interest here. Do we, municipal-wise, have an idea as to the number of residences that wish to take care of 2 hens or manage a hen house, a mini hen house, especially for constructive purposes and educational purposes for children that frequent daycare centers? But in Gatineau, for example, if they have a similar type bylaw, what is the what is the penalty imposed, monetary penalty? Well, I know that our bylaw enforcement officers already have enough difficulties in coming up with finding individuals that, have domestic animals, domestic in brackets, that they ought not to have at home. Well, you just work along those complaints received by residents. Did you see the reports as to the number of complaints we received last month? Complaints we had last month about goats, anything. anything. The number of complaints received by the bylaw enforcement department last month, 207. Look, that's certainly more, and those are all right. So, who's in favor? Who's in favor? I would like to obtain a report at least before we move on this. Well, the demand is not strong enough right now to warrant a bylaw or resolution. You know, we don't want to create a need also. I can't issue a survey on Facebook to determine how many people run a hen house or wish to have a hen house. Maybe this is something we could do. Mr. Zant, I have no comments as to this. Look, okay, I'm going to resort to a Facebook survey then. No. Look, who's in favor of continuing on with this particular matter? Ladies and gentlemen, who's in favor of furthering this matter, of pushing this matter further? 3-5? You're kidding me. Okay. So please, could you produce a report to us? The resolution will be brought to the next committee of the whole for further deliberations and possibly a decision. And that's all with regard to hens. As Mr. Grimard has stated, hens will draw in skunks and raccoons. Question period. If anyone has a question, please give us your questions. Fine. Let's go on now to the report from the United Counties of Prescott-Russell. Well, we've discussed the new Prescott-Russell residents. Are we going to go with 78 extra beds, which would give rise to a $75 million building, or are we going to leave things as they are? The vote will be taken at the next meeting of the United Counties of Prescott-Russell. I stated that I was not against the 78 beds, but this ought to be the subject of private conversations in between the United Counties of Prescott-Russell and the residents, because they're already running a $5 million residence. Or should I say a $5 million loss right now, or shortfall. It would allow also to have all services stemming from one area. I was on the area that pinpointed the site. The only reason that I favored Hawkesbury is because they had sewer gas services there, and the land was located, the property was located right close to the hospital. And the elderly that are kept there will have easy access to the hospital. It might be a chance also the hospital might take over the Prescott-Russell residents, which would be a feasible option for the United Counties of Prescott-Russell to adopt. Mr. Bouchard, during the provincial budget that was released last week, there was mention of adding care facilities and care space to the elderly. If they're talking about adding beds, it's because the provincial government stands ready to add money or put money into this. So I saw what what the government's report reflected, but it will certainly now offset the $5 million deficit. All right, Mr. Mayor. Fine. Again, you know, if we can have hands at the back that could supply eggs to the residents, to the Prescott-Russell residents, that might be a start. Let's go on now to committee reports. 9.1, request for variance to the signed bylaw. Optimist Club. Mr. Simard. The Municipal Council authorized the installation of a unilingual francophone permanent ground sign on municipal property within the right-of-way of Caron Street in Rockland for the announcement of the Rockland Optimist Club events, and that the Municipal Council approves the request for an exemption to the requirement to pay the application fees for the Rockland Optimist Club for their sign permit and sign variance applications for a total amount of $333. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Zant. Any questions? Councillor Grimard. I love the Optimist Club and all those non-profit groups that have a positive impact in our municipality. I know that they're making a request, and we have, and Mr. Boucher can help me out, we have 20 or so permanent non-profit organizations that are recognized. and I just bias, and I just want to make sure that if we're making an exemption for them, it's nice for them to announce their activities. But we also have the city of Clarkson Rockland that does announce its activities. But I'm wondering if other nonprofit organizations will have to want signs put up to advertise their own activities. And we'll wind up with many requests stemming from many nonprofit organizations to put up many signs along the Clarkson Rockland urban sprawl. I know that there are 20 or so nonprofit organizations. You know, the Air Cadets to the Golden Age Club, ranges starting from the Air Cadets and ending with the Golden Age Club. Well, to answer your question, the Optimist Club often take over activities that are started up by other organizations. Is this the case with only Optimist Club events, or are those events that are sponsored also by the Optimist Club? My question here is Francophone unilingual signs. I believe the town of Clarkson Rockland is bilingual. The Optimists Rockland Club is Francophone, Mr. Mayor. There's an Anglophone club? Not that I would think of. Knights of Columbus, I believe. Mr. Mayor? Knights of Columbus? Yeah, but it's unilingual. It's a unilingual. If we're taking a look at Lobster Supper, a lot of Anglophones attend the Optimist Supper, the Lobster Supper, not only Francophones. Yes, Mr. Lalonde. Well, to push along with what Mr. Guimard is stating, what we've done with the City of Clarkson Rockland is that all nonprofit organizations are contained in one agglomeration, if you wish, or one huge sign with many signs broken down. But they're not on the town's property, though. No. One is on a property that is owned by a very nice mayor. Others are located on private property, and then you can showcase your events. Mr. Bouchard, look, I respect community organizations as well as Mr. Grimard. The need that we have in our community is to come up with a community billboard to advertise a lot of activities. The Optimist Club does not resort to 15 activities throughout the year. Of course, it will sponsor many activities, but I believe that in an area such as this one that is contemplated to put up a sign, I believe that we would need a community-oriented billboard. I'm not ready to say yes to one organization in particular. It's given that this organization might have more money in hand as compared to other organizations to promote its events. I don't know what the answer in all of this is. On one side, I would like them to promote what they wish to do, and on the other hand, I don't know how we should go about this. Well, I believe we should give this responsibility to the department to take a look at what options we could look into. Well, we're talking about a minor variance here, or a variance. We're talking here about, we're not talking about a community center oriented variance, but what I'd like to say is that the Rockland Optimists give a lot to the community as well as other organizations, and I'm not, of course, belittling what other organizations bring to us. But at every village that you will approach, there are some community-oriented signage appearing at the entrance and at the exit of individual villages. And when there's a free event that can be showcased in this type of signage, that's fine. It can be done free of charge. But this is a particular request whereby the Optimist Club wants to showcase its own events. If we're looking at exploiting a community billboard or it's a similar type project, then that's fine. But this is not what the nature of the request targets, of this particular request targets. It targets exclusively the Optimist Club events, or those sponsored by the Optimist Club. So are we going to be creating a precedent? No, if we'll go with this billboard as proposed, the organizations are in favor of this, and we could make optimists aware of what's what. The Clarence Creek have signage on either side of the village that's being sponsored by the Optimist Club there, but they're not promoting their activities. What they have is that they'll advertise, for example, the association, the Optimists Club-related association or events themselves. But they'll say also that they'll advertise other related events also. I'm in favor of a huge signage that would cater to the needs of all nonprofit organizations within Clarence and Rockland, because I believe that last year we dealt with a similar type event, did we not, or similar type de la Morris situation. Any other comments? That's it then. Thank you. Well, what do we do with this then? Are you in favor of voting in favor or against? Who's in favor of this? Of this particular Optimist Club exclusive sign? The resolution that asks for variance to the signage bylaw. The other way would be to put in $50 each. This is your choice. I'm asking your view as to this request for variance to allow the Optimist Club. All those in favor? No. Then it shall not pass. Mr. Mayor, let me just suggest that the department contacts different associations and propose this idea to them, such as what was done when Clarence, should I say, canvass the idea of running a community billboard. Well, concerning publicity, they do, such as Clarence Creek, for example, there is a spot for community events. Do we want to showcase association logos on other signage located elsewhere than where that community billboard is? Well, that's not what they're requesting right now. The council suggests this instead of putting up an Optimist's exclusive signage. Are they afraid that other organizations might run this type of signage close to their own and promote other events? Is it that you're afraid that many organizations might want to put up similar type signage to this one that we'd approve? Yes, that is what the fear is at present. Mr. Lenart, well, the variance deals with the fees involved also. Now, do we want to ensure that they pay for the fees involved? Is this the matter? That's the sticking point, or the signage? Well, a bit of both. We'll be charging back the variance. I believe that signage, if we start putting up signage on all properties of all organizations, you'll have a lot of signage here, there, and everywhere. Councillor Levert, I believe that would not be a problem. You know, creating a precedent with regard to this. Let's just take an example with regard to Optimist Club. There are Optimist Clubs that are healthy in every village. But services that are offered through social clubs, be it the Optimist Club, is not a problem. It's not a problem if we create a precedent. And it's not a problem, certainly, if individual clubs want to put up individual signs. The Optimist Club help out a lot of auxiliary or ancillary groups. There are a lot of organizations that don't have permits to do such and such. But when they're overseen or sponsored by the Optimist Club, they might hold activities that they might not hold otherwise. So the Optimist Club help out minor or other associations. But that's not the matter. It's not a question to debate as to whether or not they're useful to the community or not. But if we do create a precedent, the matter is this. What Mr. Boucher has proposed to make use of existing signage to publicize their events, is this sufficient to meet their needs? And if so, can we just waive the fees that of $333 that we've already charged back to them? But you see, we allow companies to put up signage to indicate where a company is located at. Yes, but those companies, those business-related companies, don't have access to the Optimus signage. The resolution here states, would you like to waive this requirement of imposing them to continue to pay on this? I don't know why everybody's discussing on this. It's not quite clear as to what we were voting. We were voting on the exemption for variance with regards to signage. Well, when I took a look at this, I came to the conclusion whether or not they could be spared from paying fees to variance expectations or the variance bylaw. We can come back with another resolution. We said no to this particular resolution as it stands. If you want to come up with an alternative resolution, now's the time to come up with an alternative. Can the department come back and tell them, look, can you not advertise all of the events under the existing signage right now? If that satisfies them, that's fine. That alleviates the problem. Mr. Mayor, they know they can do so. The Optimist Club wanted a specific area for specific signage. If they want to come back to put up a signage on our property, they'll have to come up with an individual request, another individual. As things stand, they were refused this request. Well, they're a major partner in our projects. You might as well think about this twice. Well, that's why I want to mention, if you'd like to give an amount from your individual budgets, if you want to come up with an offer, an amount, $50 each, we'll come up with $360, and we'll pay for the variance fees. We're not talking about costs. We're dealing with the matter of whether or not we want a signage there or not. Well, if the signage is put up where there's a community center, it would be the municipality's property, and you'll be making proper announcements on municipally owned property. I think then in this particular instance it would be perfect. It would show that there's an organization that's strong, that stands on its own 2 feet within a given community, and it's associated with the community center. Or on Caron Street. Yes, at the edge of the industrial complex on Caron Street. But that is still owned by the municipality, is it not? Yes. Now, be it located in front of a community center or not, it is still owned by the city of Clarence and Rockland, is it not? But then, you know, if we were to bundle them up all in one area, it would be close to the community center. No, they're talking about close to the industrial park. It might be a different situation for Rockland, but in Rockland, I would ask to be given a bit more time to think about it. Let's defer to the next meeting before taking a final stand on this. So you'd like to reconsider this resolution at the next committee of the whole meeting? Would you like to obtain further information or just time to mull it over, another 30 days to mull it over? Well, maybe the Optimist Optimist Club representative can come up and defend their point of view. If they do represent many other organizations, small organizations, we want to encourage them, of course, to do so. Mr. Boucher, we'll just ask him to come up with a presentation to Town Council. Fine. Done. 9.3, proposed budget amendment. That the Committee of the Whole recommends to Council the approval of the long-term debt reduction plan of $3,703,104, which will allow an annual savings of $73,525 as presented in Report FIN 2019-014, and that the Committee of the Whole recommends to Council the allocation of the additional funds of $1,918,000 as presented in Report FIN 2019-014. Questions? Councillor Levert. Mr. Mayor, I'm always happy when we're paying down the debt, but in the report, it was stated there was nothing yet ready for this. We did implement a 10-year plan. In my sector, we had Butler and Legault where bridges were built, and Lavigne, where we worked on Lavigne and prepared for it to receive surface treatment. Those are the only areas or roadways in our municipality that stand ready to receive similar type treatment this year. And again, we're looking at another winter's worth of spreading gravel, and there in many other areas of this of the city of Clarence and Rockland. Well, we're taking a lot of money from all of this. We might go to tender with regards to Brazo, you know. That's why I bring this to everybody's attention. We, faced with ample choice, I find it unfortunate that we withdrew all surface treatment projects right now. We have a bit of money that we might make use of at present for this purpose, because we're we're lagging 2 years behind the implementation, the full implementation of our 10-year plan. But we have to pay down the debt at times, Mr. Levert. But Mr. Levert, you know, we had a resolution stating that when we were repairing a road 1 year, the next year we had to maximize the investment with regard to the preparation of the said roadway. This is what you told us to do. I'm in agreement with you, but we're taking part of this amount. We have to take a look at the debt owing, and by lowering the debt, there'll be amount made available for sewers. So we're talking about $73,000 worth of interest less to pay next year. Let's not forget this. $1 million will be earmarked for the fire hall. Correct me if I'm wrong. $1 million earmarked for the fire station. Well, we're talking about $277 earmarked for the purchase of a truck, and that was decided upon in 2017, and $1 million also for the Morris Village, 2018, and the balance of that is going to the firefighters' new building. And there's a charge also that we'll decide not to issue with regards to the water pumping station. So we have to be aware, Mr. Zant. My question is this, Mr. Mayor, is directed to Mr. Dedoyer. Look, it stands to reason that we love to contend with surfaces and to obtain money. The government has told us that it will be in temporary receipt of some money. But isn't it early, 4 years into the fiscal year, to declare a $75,000 surplus when we don't know what the rest of the year reserves to all of us? The rest of the year, well, that might lead to confusion here, is that our financial statements are not yet completed, and on the 22nd of May is the date in which the financial statements will be released. All that remains is to finalize the audit process, but there's $187,000 worth of surplus right now in between 2017 and 2018. I apologize. Yes, you're talking about 2018. We were sitting at this table trying to lower the potential tax increase from 10% to 2% and voiding money earmarked for public transit and paying down the deficit because we've come up with a surplus. Isn't there a way for having kept at least hope of not proceeding to as many cuts as we did this year? Mrs. Collier, all money that is considered surplus is a one-time surplus call, if you wish. It's not permanent. Now, the 2019 budget cuts are permanent, and it's not the same thing. I agree with you, Mrs. Collier, but Mr. Bouchard had asked, and I don't know if you want to speak to this, but we talked about parking lot facility within Morris Village to ensure people's safety. And we said, well, look, we won't proceed with this project this year. If there's any money coming in, then we'll deal with it later on. But we have $1 million made available. Yes, that was to ensure people's safety. People should not be able... No, we're not talking about this particular parking lot facility, but another parking lot facility. We were told that we didn't have 1 red cent this parking for this parking lot project. I don't know. I'm just upset that we didn't notice this ahead of time, Monsieur Desnoyers. I just like to add this, Mr. Mayor. Each and every 4 months, minimum 4 times a year, we come up with a projection with regards to a surplus or budgetary deficit. Now, on the 30th of November, that was presented to you formally at the beginning of January, that projected a surplus. We just didn't know how much, though. Well, I believe it hovered around the $500,000 amount that we projected. But this report also stated the following. In spite, this projection has been brought forward in either November and December, there are always some things at year end that might impact upon the allowable sum given to a municipality. A follow-up question then, Mr. Mayor. Mrs. Collier, based upon recommendations stemming from use and contract use of those funds, we're talking about contractual funds or contractual expenditures? Are we hiring someone else? Well, those funds are implemented, or those funds are earmarked for 3 situations, to respond to the requirements of 3 situations. I believe Mr. Desnoyers has them. I understand what you're saying, ma'am. Those funds are used. I guess I'm just not happy with the way in which it's broken down. But maybe I'm not the only one. Fine. I thought you were asking me something. I'm sorry. Mr. Grimard, I do appreciate the report that you forwarded to us because you've come up with suggestions to all members of town council. You've come up with suggestions to us, and I believe, and we might come up with a proper solution, that when we receive a sizable amount like this, it might be worthwhile holding a special meeting. We all have individual needs. This is a very proper offer, and we might proceed to a proper balance in between projects to be implemented and needs versus this. We might hold a short special meeting dealing with this particular item. For example, you talked about the roadway. We might not pay down as much on the debt and put a bit more on revamping our roadway. I read this report and I said to myself after reading this, there might be a few things we might fine-tune here. Might be an idea that we might banter about. With regards to the $2 million concerning development fees, this can only be spent for specific purposes. I understand this, Mr. Mayor. But if we were to attend a special meeting, you might take the time necessary to explain this to us. It's the $1,900,000 amount that we might explain. Mr. Simard? Well, Mr. Mayor, I'm in agreement with what Mr. Grimard has stated. Because if we review all decisions that led us to say no to certain items in the budget, if we have to review them one by one and say, well, we might say yes now. We said no then. Well, we said no to certain items because we were told that we didn't have any money. Well, who's to say that it's a good idea, the renovation of certain venues, or renovation is not a big deal. Look, we asked that some venues be painted, especially with the new room that is down at the basement. It would be nice, that houses the daycare center facilities. It would be nice to have a nice, or eggshell or off-white color instead of the color in which it's in right now. That it's colored in right now. Mr. Boucher, I follow along with that rationale because upon reading this, I would have liked to review this from a budgetary standpoint. This was not discussed. If memory serves me right, given the cuts that we're coming up with, we might, reap $500,000 over and above the initial capital expenditures that we projected, but that we might at least, if we have a $500,000, for example, surplus, these might be earmarked to specific 2018-2019 projects. As Mr. Grimard has stated, however, we all had projects in mind that we were not given the green light to implement, and given the choice of hiring a consultant to determine whether a green light or a traffic light should be put at an intersection to save lives, as opposed to building something in another part that might... Look, before we go any further, I would ask maybe that a day be set aside prior to the meeting to discuss this matter. If you're talking about holding a special meeting. It's a Friday. If it's a Friday and hockey season's already started, the hockey playoffs, come on. I'm asking that everybody forward me individual emails. That could be part, and you remember, I believe we have a special day set aside for municipal council related activities. Well, it's a good start, at least, Mr. Mayor. I like that we are lowering the debt to be able to free ourselves from the constraints of an annual budget right now, when we're talking about $500,000 per year, and if we have this amount available to us, we don't have to raise taxes. I'm not in agreement with the $28,000 earmarked for the fire stations. I'm not in agreement with that, but it should be looked upon as a contingency request. We ought not to increase the budget. When we're short of money in the contingency fees, well, that's it, and they'll have to fight with all other department heads to obtain money from the capital expenditure funds. And I believe it's going to be... I'm not against the fact of having it. I'm just against what we've been bantering around about, if you wish. Does the county wish to have a list of all those projects that are subject to cuts be identified prior to the 10th of May, if we want a list? Those projects that are subject to cuts? No. Well, to some extent, if that can be drafted, that would be fine. I don't want to revamp. I don't want to rehash a budget from start to finish. Just communicate by email, and we'll try to come up with a solution. We'll just come back and say where the amounts will go. We don't want $750,000 in roads. We'll put it in another department. I actually didn't mean where we would negotiate where it went. I just meant how we would like it presented. That's all I meant. That's it. All right. All right, then. So, is everybody available on May the 10th, by the way, for this marathon session that we're proposing? The 10th of May, the whole day. Yes. All that day. Ah, the light came out suddenly in some people's minds. Oh, my. So we'll defer this item for further consideration at the special meeting to be held on the 10th of May. I second this motion. All those in favor? Carried then. Thank you. All right then, let's go on. Where are we at now in the agenda? Madam Clerk? Next item. Committee of Adjustment, Remuneration. Committee of Adjustment. Compensation of members. Do you want me to read this? That the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council confirms that bylaw number 2011-33 as adopted shall remain in effect, and that the members of the Committee of Adjustment be remunerated as prescribed. Option 2, that the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council directs the administration. It's a motion. Councillor Levert needs to choose one of the options before him. He has a choice to make. You choose the option that you wish to be adopted, and if that's not adopted, then we'll go on to the next one. All right? Okay. So let's just stop at option 2. Okay. Option 2, that the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council directs the administration to prepare a bylaw to amend bylaw number 2011-33 in order to change the amount of remuneration for the members of the Committee of Adjustment. That the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council mandate no, I'm sorry. Oh, so we'll just stop at option 2. So what you're proposing is option 2. Yes. Yes, we're proposing option 2. Seconded by? I'll second this. Councillor Bouchard, any questions? Yes? Mr. Lalonde, I remember this item because we'd already discussed this at previous sittings of Town Council in previous years. And the reason why we came up with this particular decision is that we wanted to deal uniformly with all committees that we're involved in. There are a lot of people that put in a lot of time to those committees that they sit at on the town's behalf. And I said that we did something to thank those people that do so on a volunteer basis. We haven't done anything up to now. We should continue what we've done in the past, but we should do something on an annual basis to thank those volunteers that sit on these committees year in and year out. Does the law prescribe this contingency? The law states that Town Council must remunerate its members as prescribed. So, for the Minor Variance Committee, for example, Mr. Mayor, if we do interpret the law as it now stands, Council has to establish a rate for paying those volunteers in lieu of remuneration. It can't be a straight payment. Mr. Zant, could it be possible to ask the administration to prepare a report to compare remunerations paid out to similar type municipalities in our county, and if we decide to do something, we'll adopt it at the next round of budgetary talks. I'm in agreement that we should remunerate or pay some of those volunteers that do sit on a regular basis. If you take a look at those committees, Mr. Mayor, we were sitting on the selection committee, Mr. Mayor, you and I. It was hard to come up with people because some committees had no one that was interested in sitting on. Well, the Minor Variance Committee is a quasi-judicial body. So, this being said, members of the committee really take decisions that are informed and based on law in part and make recommendations to council, and the law prescribes that there ought to be remuneration paid out to those members as decided by town councils. And those mandatory committees, such as minor variance committees, render decisions that have a legal tender. So they have a surplus of liability in all of this. Well, if it's a law, why was it modified? Well, if it's a law, it's because we eliminated it. Well, if it went against the grain of the existing law, well, when we entered into this discussion at that time, we were specifically told by town administration, you're not compelled to pay them. That's why we opted not to pay them, to be fair to everyone. Given the report that was sent to council to the effect that members of this committee not be remunerated, with the exception of those that are prescribed by law. And the Minor Variance Committee is one of those committees that is prescribed by law, and I believe that bylaw 2011-33 never was voided, abolished, or modified. And I don't know why. However, in the past, some payments were stopped being made to members of the Minor Variance Committee, going against the grain of the implemented bylaw. I believe it might be the result of poor communication in between town administration and members of the committee at that time. You see, there's a lack of information. There's a mix-up here. We thought of doing away with amounts paid to every volunteers. We were not correct in doing so. That's it. If you take a look at the documents attached to this particular report, and if you take a look at the policy that was adopted, Mr. Mayor, over and above the 15 already outlined there were directives set out by administration, and there was a report that was adopted in 2015 with stating the same policy or restating that same policy, but it did not specify that the Minor Variance Committee was subject to this. The policy was adopted, but the Minor Variance bylaw was already implemented. It was voted on in 2011, you see. I think it might just be a matter of bad interpretation of the intent or poor communications. But the fact remains that the bylaw will be adopted in keeping with the last resolution that was adopted in 2015, or do we have to come up with a new resolution that goes hand in hand with this proposed amendment? Because in 2015 it states that they should be paid. In 2011 it stated that they should not be paid. Well, in 2015 the resolution that adopted did not undo the previous intent with regards to minor variance that was adopted in 2011, did not undo it. However, it did relate to those committees under bylaw 2011-33 that refused or that did do away with remuneration to volunteers, save and except those mandated by law. But as of 2016, members of the Minor Variance Committee stopped being paid. I do not know why, because the directive of not paying them was never voted on or ratified, if you wish. Well, Mr. Mayor, I don't know why we need to resort to a resolution to this effect. If, in fact, this is the case, we just reinitiate the payments, and Mr. Vizant wants to determine how similar type members are paid in neighboring municipalities. It's just that the bylaw does exist at present, and normally they should have the right to be paid at present, unless we might just say, let's pay them all $50 per meeting, and the matter is solved. The reason why I brought this report to your attention, Mr. Mayor, is that it be clear in everyone's mind, and that everybody be made aware of the situation, and that you will confirm to me that you are in agreement with this rate that you've just told us about tonight, $50 per meeting, that would go hand in hand with the bylaw and its requirements. Mr. Mayor? Yes. With regards to volunteers, the volunteers' lunch or banquet, if you wish, that was also voted. I believe the Saint Pascal de Bellon town councillor voted on this. I see. She hosted an event in Saint Pascal. Yes, a similar type event, and this was voted. So it should be that we've created a precedent in this regard. But there was not a budget that was earmarked for that particular purpose, however. So we can't follow through on this. But, you know, we have $1 million surplus now that we've come up with. In any event, we'll produce a report. Mrs. Joignet, wouldn't it be cheaper for us to pay members of the committee rather than host a volunteers night, you know, that would call upon additional expenditures? Fine, we'll come up with a report. Let's go on now to the next item. Mr. Simard proposed amendment. Whereas the community services receive several requests for recognition from nonprofit organizations annually, and whereas policy LOI 2014-01 states that each application for recognition must be approved by municipal council. Be it resolved that the Committee of the Whole hereby recommends to municipal council to adopt the proposed amendments to policy LOI 2014-01 nonprofit organizations in order to allow the community services director to evaluate and approve the submitted requests as presented. Now that's an amendment to the nonprofit organizations. Item 9.6, proposed new hall rental policy. Mr. Lalonde, whereas the current community hall rental policy needs to be updated and reflect the future online booking system, that the Committee of the Whole recommends Council adopt policy LOI 2019-01, being the policy for establishing guidelines for managing municipal community hall rentals, effective June 1st, 2019, repealing policy LOI 98-02, and that the Committee of the Whole further recommends that Council adopt a bylaw to replace Schedule J of the User Fee Bylaw 2019-16 with the amended Schedule G, or J should I say, showing the revised rental rates for community halls as attached to report LOI 2019-04-05, seconded by Mrs. Chouanière. Questions? Councillor Grimard. I know that we want to convert this into an electronic format. How do we convert this on our website to make it easy for people to tap into this information? Will this reservation generate an automatic response? If there's a hole in the calendar, it will generate an automatic response, or is it funneled to the community services that will look into this request? If it's electronically run, it has to be managed by someone to make sure that if they make a reservation, if there's an opening, and if there are no other further openings, it's rented out. Well, given the program that we'll be making use of, of course, it will need to be pre-approved. People will make their requests, will forward their requests for reservations. We'll take a look at their request, and we'll approve or not approve it, and it will be forwarded an invoice automatically. Everything will be automated, and you'll be given a general overview of the process very quickly and automatically. We want to, of course, free up employees from doing this because it's not a full automatic process, if you wish. The only difference is that individual makes this request online, right? And at present they're able to do so. Isn't there a form that people can print out and fill them out by hand? Yes, the administrative assistant has to put in manually either through an Excel-based calendar or an Outlook-based calendar. It's a fairly lengthy process, and she also has to generate an invoice that is sent to financial services also. And we also have a financial services purpose that generates invoices. So 2 or 3 individuals have to go through this same process. This one person will receive an email that will receive confirmation of the whole process, but we'll be saving a lot of time. In all systems that we've taken a look at, what you've alluded to is pretty much the same, the way in which it's run here, there, and everywhere in other municipalities. We can't automate the system from start to finish, however. It's not feasible, but there's this matter of taking a very last human look at this before automating the process. Yes, it's important, of course, to save on manpower, but it's important also to offer quality services. People are not called upon to wait 3 or 4 days before they receive final approval. They'll still go through a waiting process, but they'll be prioritized, of course. I know that, but they'll be prioritized. The first come with request, first served. Mr. Bouchard, the class program has existed now for quite a while in many municipalities, and all municipalities that have made use of this system have all been very content in doing so. Now, the class program was an Anglophone program, so we went with the booking software, which is bilingual. We've performed a lot of research, and that caters to our needs, both French and English, and that will also cater to the needs of the community at large. Fine, all those in favor? Fine then, let's go on. Unmaintainable roads, let's go on to this. Yes, whereas the minimum standards for municipal highways has been implemented since 2003, and whereas Dulac from baseline to 2213 Dulac, Indian Creek north of Russell to dead end McTier to Front Canaan to County Road 17 are no longer maintainable in their current service conditions to a minimum standards of repair as identified in the minimum maintenance standards for minimal highways. That council approve an amount of $143,800 be taken from the maintenance and reconstruction of roads reserve fund to finance the conversion of hard surface back to gravel for these sections of roads. Seconded by Mr. Bouchard. Questions? Mr. Bouchard, can we add temporarily or a temporary fix to this? Well, I saw this as a temporary fix in the report, but could we add the word or the term temporary in the resolution? Well, I think it's already understood. Well, by adding temporarily, it underscores the fact that we'd like to repave this at a further date. Yes, temporary along with a pinpointed date. No, just temporarily for now. So we are confirming that the surface of those roadways are solid enough, the surfaces are solid enough to not give rise to any further trouble. If we decide to cover this up with new asphalt, the base will be solid enough to support it? Well, yes and no. Mr. Mayor, in its current state, these roadways cannot be properly maintained. We'll be able to identify as the days and months go by what kind of structure and what type of base is needed to ensure that work is done that will ensure proper quality. Well, are we going to be taking a look at possible work done next year that will entail many thousands of dollars of expenditures? Possible. Mr. Mayor, if memory serves me right, when we did perform repairs on St. Felix Road, we removed the asphalt there, and I believe, if memory serves me right, that we held the public meeting with residents of that ward before coming to a decision. Mr. Lavert, I'm asking you to take a look at our roadway. People that are thanking me if we were to revert this back to its gravel state. Look, these roads, well, Mill Creek is the same thing. It presents us with the same dilemma. Look, we have no other choice. We have to go this route. Are we going to relay to the residents what our intent is? Yes, let's send them a letter. Mr. Leonard? Well, if council approves this and it is ratified at the next meeting, we could send this, well, let's say for Dulac. Well, Dulac has already been approved for consultation purposes, for this year at least. Yes, the soil analysis for this particular section has already been approved, but not for all services there. We had an amount taken out from the capital expenditures on or about $40,000 to perform cursory work before going to tender. I know that, but we can contact residents to make and send them individual letters to make them aware that this has been approved. It behooves individual councillors to contact their individual wards to make them aware of this situation. Buses will be all broken up by the end of the year if roads remain the way they are. Mrs. Chouanière, well, I believe that people will take a look at what's being discussed at tonight's meeting. It'll give them 2 weeks to react to what's being said here tonight. And if they see they have any objections to this, people might show up at the meeting that's going to be held in 2 weeks from this point in time without advertising it with a capital A. People, certainly, word will circulate from one quarter to another. Those that live along that road, let me tell you, I'm not surprised by this set of facts, but I thought that we would have tackled that at the time that we entered into budgetary talks. When should this ought to have been done? I believe last spring. Mr. Mayor, some of those roads are in that particular state at present, not only this one, and we're deploying all efforts necessary to circumvent those particular problems. Is Gagne Road also in the same dilemma? No, this is a paved road. Let me say that there was a paved area, and I asked that gravel be spread over that paved area. There were so many potholes there, it was impossible to repair the roadway. All those in favor then? Carried, thank you. Let's go on now. For investing in Canada Infrastructure Program funding application for Laurier Street. Mr. Lalonde. That report, INF 2019-016, be received as information. I second this resolution. Any questions? All those in favor? Thank you then. Let's cross our fingers. Village Morris, signature of construction contracts and management of the project, Mr. Zant. Whereas Atrell Engineering has designed all the plans and specifications for the construction of the Morris Village Park, and that this firm is therefore well versed to supervise the work. That the Committee of the Whole recommends that Municipal Council adopts a bylaw to authorize the Mayor and the City Clerk to sign a contract with Hawkesbury Transport and Excavation, Inc. in order to execute the construction works for Morris Village Park for an amount of $599,146, excluding HST, and that the Committee of the Whole recommends that Municipal Council accepts to allow an exemption from the procurement policy in order to adopt a bylaw to authorize the Mayor and the City Clerk to sign a contract with Atrell Engineering for the administration and supervision of the construction work for the Morris Village Park for an amount of $36,000, excluding TVH, as recommended in staff report number LOI 2019-04-03. Seconded by Councillor Bouchard. Questions? Councillor Lalonde. I believe it bears noticing that we acted properly last year by going to tender much earlier during the course of the year, and we've reaped benefits from this. Well, will Atrell be responsible for any problems that are design related? Well, of course, if there are problems that are identified, the town will be held responsible. Well, I believe that I've identified some shortcomings in the email that I've sent to all of you. Yes, I believe we've looked into those. Mr. Leonard? I believe that we need to ratify this. This is not something that the City of Clarendon and Rockland would be held liable to pay any costs. If it's a design, yes. But if it's a mistake, however, no. If it's a cost that the City of Clarendon and Rockland is called upon to pay, and we received a legal opinion, and if there are no damages that was caused to the city or by this to the city will not be called upon to pay. Let me give you an example. A building is supposed to be built along certain lines of contingencies, and the builder would have been obliged to go over and beyond the threshold. The city would not be held responsible to pay for the difference in what was standard and what needs to be paid to complete the process. I understand, but if it would have cost us more and we did not have the money in hand, we would not have proceeded with this. Look, there are many exceptions that come into play, types of exceptions that come into play. It's difficult to come up with an enlightened opinion as to this. It's a matter of determining whether this design should have been thought out at the time in which it was thought out, or do we have to go back to tender now and call for alternate designs? Then a firm would be called upon to pay for those expenditures. The firm would not be held responsible for those fees if we took that decision to go back to tender, you see. Yes? Now, further to what has been stated up to now, is there a minimum or a maximum? If we've forgotten a contingency somewhere, well, there's always a 10% contingency fee set aside for individual projects. Let me give you an example. We're building a roadway, and there was a retaining wall that was built at a certain area and should not have been built there. And in keeping with the design, it was put up to another area. Well, we can't go back to the engineering firm. So a building of such a size, given the retaining wall that would be changed from one area to another because of the town's decision to do so, will not hold that company or the builder liable for this. Of course, I'm not an engineer, but it seems to me that it's a great waste of money to move this piece of property to another. Well, in this case, we had to build a retention wall that was extremely expensive. Now, to move earth, soil, and to build a retention wall, it would save us money with regards to the 2017 project. Mr. Bouchard, if my math holds true, the $500,000 last year, and we add $325,000, that comes up to $825,000, and would be hovering at around $836,000 total. If you take a look at the total expenditures set out in the report, you have all of the ins and outs of the sums that of the amounts that play into the sum arrived at. You see, we discussed at the budget those contingencies with regard to the other parking lot at Deschamps Park, and we're in line with the. Well, if we take a look at the budget, if you take a look at expenditures, the two amounts, the amount there was 10% contingency amounts, $60,000, $500 that was set aside. Will this be spent? It all depends, whether there are unforeseen contingencies that need to be spent. We can't say, we can take the $60,000 and spend it elsewhere and then wind up short with this project. We'll have to wait later on in the construction phase to determine whether or not there are some funds still left available to us. All those in favor then? Carried. Thank you. Item 9.10, Mr. Levert. 9.10. That report admin 2019-10 be received for information purposes. I'm sorry? Is that the right? Item 9.10. Mr. Lalonde. I just want to second this. All right. Questions? How much in advance do we have to reserve? This is an invitation to Boyon in South Korea. We were asked to attend the South Korean municipality. You pay for your plane fees, and the mayor of Boyon, what's its name? What's the mayor's name, Mr. Mayor? You've got me there. Mr. Mayor, I'm interested in attending. Just send an email to Mrs. Collier saying that you'd like to attend. I find it unfortunate that there's no way of paying for air travel because we're going there to represent the city. Well, we're going there to represent our city. They came here twice when we signed an agreement to have both towns be deemed and as partners, well, there are no business opportunities really available to us down there at present. I'll pay for my own expenditures. I'm not in favor that the city of Clareton Rockland pay for this, Mrs. Collier. Well, we were tethered to the South Korean city, of course. I'm going to ask that there be a possibility that they pay airfare, depending on the number. When I mentioned to the mayor that we had no funds for this, he told me, if you pay for your airfare, we'll take care of all of your expenditures incurred in South Korea. Air travel has to be paid out of pocket individually. Fine. If you are interested in attending, send an email to Mrs. Collier so that we'll be able to continue on with this. Let's go on now. Item 9.11, monthly protective services report. Mrs. Chouanière. Mr. Mayor, I move that report PRO 2019-010 in regards to monthly statistics be received as information. Well then, I need someone to second this motion. Fine. Mr. Bouchard, any questions? Any questions? All those in favor? Yes. Hey, you had it easy this time, didn't you? Yes. Let's go on now to construction services monthly reports. I move that the construction services monthly statistics be received for information purposes. Fine. Seconded by Mr. Bouchard. Questions? All those in favor? Carried then, thank you. Folks, do you have any questions for our department heads? Mrs. Chouanière, I'd just like to know the following. For the study that was commissioned last year and hire a company to take a look at the Clarence Creek and Bourget situations, we were told that a company would perform an analysis to implement an appropriate systems that would give us an actual reflection of what actual costs are for whatever we do and whatever budget we come up with and whatever project we enter into. I'd just like to determine what costs are involved with this. Fine. That's it, Ms. Chouanière. Councillor Grimard, thank you. Councillor Jean, Councillor Cardarelli, thank you. Mr. Bouchard, thank you. Councillor Levert, I'm sorry to come back to this, Mr. Leonard, but the traffic light at the corner of Vinette and Bouvier is so dangerous. It has been installed, but it's burned out in the past. But the new one has been installed. The transformer is not performing adequately. I noted there was a car that was goes by. They're always used to see lights at the intersection, but it's very dark at that particular intersection. It's very dangerous. Dangerous going. The new light is there. It was burnt beforehand, but the company was there to change the LED light, but not the apparatus that runs the light. Well, we made the request, but we're going to ask them to, we're going to ask this company to repair this unit. Fine. No other questions? Adjournment called at 9:50 p.m. Thank you, one and all. Good evening, one and everybody, and have a nice weekend. Thank you then.